Dawn cracks open over an icy, windswept plain. The massive shapes of mammoths loom like moving mountains against the soft pink sky. Wrapped in a tattered fur cloak and clutching a crude wooden spear, you stare up at one of these towering beasts, your heart pounding like a drum. Today's mission? Try to ride one of these prehistoric giants. No leather saddles, no horse training guides, no YouTube tutorials. Just you, your courage, or foolishness, some ropes woven from grass, and a mammoth that's not exactly auditioning for America's Next Top Rideable Animal. This wasn't about fun, it was about survival, status, and maybe a little bit of showing off to impress the cave crew. Today we're diving headfirst into the wild world of mammoth riding. How did our ancestors even think this was a good idea? Buckle up. This is going to be one bumpy ride. So, how did cavemen actually start riding these colossal beasts? The answer is simple. Clumsily, loudly, and often painfully. There were no fancy mounting blocks or neat training arenas where you could practice your jumps or balance. Nope. This was all rough and tumble, trial and error, hold on for dear life stuff. Picture a group of early humans, faces smeared with dirt and streaks of ochre, shouting and waving sticks like mad, all in an effort to catch the attention of a massive mammoth who's probably more interested in munching on some shrubbery or swatting away pesky flies. Distraction tactics were the order of the day. Someone would lob rocks or wave spears wildly to divert the mammoth's gaze, buying just enough time for a couple of brave, or perhaps foolhardy, individuals to approach from the sides. Approaching head-on was basically a death wish thanks to those tusks, which could swing with the force of a wrecking ball and the precision of a master chef's knife. A wrong move and you'd be looking at a tusk-shaped concussion, or worse. Once close enough, the real challenge began. Getting on a mammoth was like trying to climb a slick, moving mountain that was not exactly interested in giving you a free ride. Its fur was thick and matted, but no less slippery when combined with the beast's natural jerks and shakes. The mammoth might have tossed its massive head, stomped a foot, or tried to flick you off like a particularly annoying fly. You weren't just climbing, you were wrestling gravity, momentum, and a gigantic hairy bull. Early humans likely used whatever they could to get a grip. Thick ropes made from twisted grasses or animal sinew might have been looped tightly around the mammoth's neck, tusks, or torso, offering a handhold as they scrambled up. Some tribes may have even fashioned rudimentary padded seats or cushions from layers of hides and furs, although this is mostly speculation since fabric technology was, well, prehistoric. Still, the idea of a woolly saddle isn't far-fetched. Comfort was probably low on the priority list when your alternative was getting trampled. Let's be brutally honest here, the success rate was pretty low. The first mammoth riders probably spent more time face down in the snow than perched triumphantly atop their giant mounts. Falls, tramplings, and surprise charges were likely common, leaving a trail of bruises, scrapes, and maybe a few permanently broken noses. But human tenacity is nothing to underestimate. Trial and error was their greatest teacher. Over time, with countless bruises and embarrassing spills, these early riders learned how to tighten their grip, anticipate the mammoth's sudden moves, and maybe even develop a kind of primitive seat that held them in place. The mammoth might have still been a wild, unpredictable beast, but our ancestors were learning its rhythm, reading its moods, and figuring out how to ride it like a living, breathing, furry chariot. And with each successful ride, the legend of the mammoth rider grew, inspiring the next generation to climb aboard, warts, bruises, and all. Mammoth riding was never a solo endeavor. It was a full-on village project that demanded teamwork, coordination, and a fair amount of bravery from everyone involved. This wasn't some lone wolf sport where a single hero showed off their skills. It was a communal effort, a test of social bonds and group strategy. Without the whole crew pitching in, the chances of surviving a mammoth ride were slim at best. While one or two brave, or maybe downright crazy, souls took on the daunting task of climbing onto the giant beast and holding on for dear life, the rest of the group had equally important roles. Some were tasked with keeping the mammoth distracted, waving branches, shouting, or throwing rocks, hopefully not hitting their own people, to steer the beast's attention away from the riders. Others tried to calm the massive creature using soothing noises, gentle touches, or simply standing between it and potential dangers, acting as a buffer. Beyond just managing the mammoth's mood, the group worked together to herd the animals toward terrain that favored control. Soft tundra or riverbanks with muddy, squishy ground were ideal, places where a mammoth's enormous weight was a little less of a death sentence for the rider if things went sideways. Firm ground, steep cliffs, or dense forest were no-go zones. Maneuvering such enormous beasts required patience and coordination, as the entire band moved as one, herding, guiding, and corralling. Speaking of corralling, sometimes the groups would lead the mammoths into narrow valleys or natural funnels carved by rivers or glaciers. Ancient version of a mammoth corral. This limited the beast's movement, making it easier to throw ropes over the neck or legs, and giving the rider a better chance to mount safely. These natural funnels acted as prehistoric rodeo arenas, except with a lot more tusks and fur flying around. Successfully riding a mammoth wasn't just a personal achievement. It was a major social triumph. The respect and prestige earned by someone who could tame and control one of these giants were immense. Imagine the status boost. Leading the mammoth hunt, gaining faster travel across harsh landscapes, and maybe even offering a dramatic spectacle around the campfire that left everyone wide-eyed and impressed. That kind of social capital wasn't just about ego. It could mean better mates, more resources, and a stronger place in the tribe's hierarchy. The promise of prestige inspired countless attempts and gave rise to what were probably some very strange training rituals. Picture young warriors practicing their balance on logs or rock piles, running with ropes over their shoulders, and simulating mammoth rides with wild grunts and exaggerated flailing. There might even have been rituals involving mock mammoth wrestling, with the whole group cheering or chanting, preparing new riders for the real deal. This wasn't just about physical skill, it was about trust. The rider had to rely on the team for safety, and the team had to trust the rider not to panic and cause a stampede. It was a delicate dance of coordination, courage, and community spirit. And while it was wildly dangerous, the rewards, both practical and social, made it a risk worth taking for those early humans eager to harness the power of the mammoth. Once on the mammoth, staying on was an entirely new challenge, one that tested every ounce of strength, balance, and nerve the rider possessed. Unlike the horses or camels we're familiar with today, these prehistoric riders didn't have the luxury of stirrups to secure their feet or saddles to stabilize their seats. Their grip was a combination of raw physical power, quick reflexes, and the clever but rudimentary use of ropes, straps, or animal hides tightly wrapped around the mammoth's massive, shaggy body. Every muscle was engaged as they clung to the moving mountain beneath them, struggling not to be tossed into the snow or trampled underfoot. Riders had to become intimately familiar with the unpredictable rhythm of the mammoth's movements. The creature wasn't a well-trained steed. It was a wild, often temperamental giant with moods as changeable as the northern winds. Tusks swung with devastating force, capable of knocking a person off with a single sweep. When startled or annoyed, a mammoth could suddenly charge forward with surprising speed, turning what seemed like a calm ride into a heart-pounding sprint across icy plains. Panicked runs could send riders tumbling, or worse, slammed into obstacles or deep snowdrifts. To survive, riders had to anticipate these motions instinctively, reading subtle shifts in the mammoth's body language, timing their own movements to stay one step ahead of danger. It was less a leisurely ride and more a brutal, sweaty, terrifying dance between human and beast, where a single misstep could spell disaster. Some anthropologists speculate that early mammoth riders might have employed thorny branches or sharpened sticks to steer or discourage unwanted moves, using whatever was at hand as primitive reins or cues. Though there's no concrete evidence for this, it's a plausible theory given the ingenuity of early humans and their tendency to adapt natural tools for survival purposes. These makeshift aids might have been pressed gently against the mammoth's sides to signal direction, or jabbed cautiously to quell bursts of agitation, effectively combining negotiation and dominance in a high-stakes animal-human partnership. But at its core, riding a mammoth was a raw, visceral experience, no comfort, no control beyond what the rider could wrestle from the massive creature. Sweat poured down faces hardened by cold and exertion, fingers cramped from clutching ropes, made frayed by constant strain. Hearts pounded in chests as riders fought not only the mammoth's strength, but also the rising terror that came with such a precarious perch. Every moment was a precarious balance of courage, skill, and sheer willpower, an epic struggle played out on the backs of nature's most formidable beasts. History tends to celebrate the successful mammoth rides, the daring few who managed to cling to the shaggy giants and emerge triumphant. But if the truth were told, the stories of failure, chaos, and downright slapstick disasters were probably even more common, and definitely more entertaining. Imagine the tales passed down around the fire, told and retold with growing exaggeration. You'd hear of riders who were spectacularly launched into deep snowbanks, their bodies disappearing under fluffy drifts, while their terrified shouts echoed across the tundra. Or the poor souls who got hopelessly tangled in ropes, no longer riders but human burritos, flailing wildly as their mammoth took off, completely oblivious to the chaos unfolding on its back. One particularly colorful legend might have involved a mammoth shaking off a rider with such force that the hapless human was catapulted into a muddy pit. Instead of giving up, the rider emerged hours later, covered in slime and mud from head to toe, sputtering curses and vowing revenge on that oversized beast, while the rest of the tribe howled with laughter at the spectacle. These stories weren't just tales of failure, they were the backbone of prehistoric humor and humility, because when you're trying to tame an animal bigger than your entire shelter, and when you inevitably get knocked on your backside more times than you can count, you quickly learn the importance of laughing at yourself. Resilience wasn't just about grit, it was about embracing the absurdity of your situation. The mammoth rider's life was a mix of triumph and pratfalls, glory and bruises, bravery and embarrassing flops. It was a wild ride, literally and figuratively, where mistakes were expected, sometimes fatal, but often the source of the greatest campfire stories. And it was these stories, with their humor and humility, that helped knit early human communities closer together, reminding everyone that even in the harshest conditions, a good laugh could be a powerful survival tool. Though mammoth riding never evolved into a widespread or permanent mode of transportation, mammoths eventually vanished from the earth, victims of climate change, human hunting, and shifting ecosystems. The daring early attempts to tame and ride these colossal beasts represent far more than just fleeting moments of prehistoric audacity. They stand as important evolutionary milestones that reflect the boundless creativity, courage, and unyielding spirit of early humans. These experiments showcase humanity's instinctive drive to push boundaries, to innovate in the face of enormous challenges, and to find new ways to thrive in an often unforgiving world. The mammoth riders weren't merely seeking thrill or status. They were pioneers on the front lines of survival technology, inventing strategies and testing ideas that would echo through the ages. The lessons learned from these mammoth riding endeavors laid the conceptual groundwork for future domestications. The courage and ingenuity it took to climb onto a massive, unpredictable mammoth paved the way, both practically and symbolically, for taming other large animals that could serve as reliable partners and modes of transport. Horses, camels, and donkeys would later become vital to human expansion, trade, and warfare, fundamentally altering the course of civilizations. Eventually, humans would harness mechanical power, invent vehicles, and revolutionize mobility entirely. But those grand technological leaps trace their roots back to those first wild rides atop woolly giants. More profoundly, the attempts to ride mammoths symbolize a defining aspect of the human condition: the deep-seated desire to connect with, understand, and master the environment around us. Whether it was the earth beneath their feet, the animals they hunted, or the forces of nature itself, early humans were constantly experimenting, adapting, and collaborating to turn the wild into something navigable, usable, and ultimately human. In this sense, mammoth riding was more than a physical act. It was a metaphor for the human journey. It captured the essence of bravery, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of progress. It showed that, no matter how wild, unwieldy, or intimidating the challenges, humans have always been willing to climb on, hold tight, and ride the unpredictable waves of change. So next time you find yourself wobbling precariously on a bike or struggling to keep your balance on a skateboard, take a moment to remember that you are carrying on a legacy far older and far wilder than any modern sport or pastime. Your ancestors, tens of thousands of years ago, faced a challenge that made today's balance woes look like child. They were literally balancing atop woolly mammoths, massive, lumbering creatures with swinging tusks that could crush bones and hooves pounding through snow and ice. Every moment on their backs was a high-stakes gamble where survival itself hung in the balance. Mammoth riding was messy, it was chaotic, it was filled with falls, tumbles, and cringe-worthy missteps that would make even the most uncoordinated skateboarder blush. It was dangerous to the extreme. One wrong move could mean being tossed off into the freezing tundra, trampled underfoot, or caught in the sweeping arc of a furious tusk. But through all the pain and peril, it was also an astonishing testament to the human spirit. Our relentless daring, our refusal to accept limits, and our drive to conquer the impossible. And of course, it was hilarious. One can almost picture the stories that would have been told around the fire afterward. The mammoth that sent a rider flying into a snowbank, the tangled ropes that turned men into writhing bundles of fur and sinew, the heroic warrior who tried to wrestle a mammoth into submission, only to end up covered in mud and laughter from his fellow tribespeople. These were the moments that forged bonds, sparked laughter, and passed wisdom from one generation to the next. Because here's the thing about mammoth riding, it wasn't just about transportation or hunting advantage. It was about testing limits, embracing risk, and creating stories that bound a community together. It was a wild, untamed adventure that defined what it meant to be human, courageous, inventive, and endlessly adaptable. So next time you wobble, fall, or scrape a knee, smile. You're in good company. Your ancestors faced way bigger challenges and somehow managed to turn those epic falls into epic tales. And if it didn't kill them, it made for some unforgettable stories by the fire. Stories that, over millennia, have helped shape the adventurous, resilient spirit living inside you today.